Greetings, fellow Potterheads. Get ready to dive deep into the wizarding world like never before. This episode is a little different. We start with a story, introducing today's theory about the Deathly Hallows and Unforgivable curses. Then we will dive into the usual thoughts and possibilities surrounding this exciting theory. So, let our story begin. It was a stormy night at the Hogshead Inn. The kind of night that made the candles flicker and the fiery shadows stretch long against the stone walls. In a dimly lit corner, two wizards and one witch sat hunched over their butterbeers and fire whiskey, their voices low but filled with excitement, deep in discussion about the Deathly Hallows. The three had just finished their first day in their new jobs as unspeakables within the Department of Mysteries. Theo, Cassius, and Elena, all former Ravenclaw students, had been friends since their school days and had all been working together at the Ministry of Magic since leaving Hogwarts. After a pause in their conversation, Theo pushed his glass aside and said, "All right, hear me out. We've all heard the tale of the Deathly Hallows, right? The Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, and the Invisibility Cloak? But what if I told you they're connected to something much darker?" Cassius and Elena exchanged glances. "Connected to what exactly?" Cassius asked, raising an eyebrow. Theo looked around the inn to make sure nobody was in earshot, his eyes glinting in the candlelight. He whispered, "The unforgivable curses." Just as Theo had finished his last word, there was a flash of lightning and a deafening clap of thunder. The inn was momentarily illuminated with eerie, bright white light. Elena looked out of the window at the rain pouring down onto the streets of Hogsmeade. She let out a short laugh and said, "Come on, that sounds a bit far-fetched. How could the Hallows, the ultimate magical artifacts, be linked to the darkest spells in existence?" Theo grinned and replied, "Yes, maybe, but let's look at the evidence. The Elder Wand is described as unbeatable, the most powerful wand in existence. So what's the most powerful spell that can't be blocked or beaten?" Cassius's expression darkened slightly before saying, "Well, the Avada Kedavra curse." "Exactly," said Theo excitedly. "The Elder Wand and the Killing Curse both symbolize ultimate power. The wand wins any duel, and the curse ends any duel before it even begins. And what's worse, the Elder Wand's history is full of betrayals and bloodshed, just like Avada Kedavra leaves nothing but bodies and misery in its wake. Power corrupts, and both of these things prove it." Elena bit her lip and looked deep in thought. "Okay, that's one connection. But what about the other two Hallows and Unforgivable curses, then?" Theo's eyes gleamed, and he continued. "The Resurrection Stone. Well, that one's trickier, until you remember what it actually does. It doesn't truly bring back the dead, does it? It brings back shadows, memories, painful, sorrowful echoes of what was lost. The Resurrection Stone is built on grief, and what curse is most associated with endless suffering or torture?" Cassius inhaled sharply and replied, "The Cruciatus Curse." Theo nodded. "Exactly. The Resurrection Stone and the Cruciatus Curse both basically do the same thing. They reduce people to shadows of themselves. You think you're getting something back, whether it's a lost loved one or control over your own pain, but it just leads to suffering. Think about the story of the three brothers. The stone led to the middle brother taking his own life. Now look at what the Cruciatus Curse did to the Longbottoms. They were tortured to insanity. The stone and the curse both either slowly kill people or leave them broken beyond repair." The rain outside had become heavier and was now lashing against the windows. Elena's skeptical smirk had vanished, and she said, "All right, that's two down. That leaves the Invisibility Cloak, and you can't tell me that thing is evil. It's protection. It keeps you hidden. Even in the old fairy tale, it was the good one of the three Hallows." Theo gave a small chuckle and then added, "Sure, when you use it correctly for the right reasons, the cloak can make you disappear. But what if someone wanted to make you disappear? Not physically, but mentally. What curse could they use to make the real you, your mind, your morals, your inhibitions, disappear?" Cassius frowned and quietly said, "The Imperious Curse?" "Now you're getting it," Theo replied, grinning triumphantly. "The Invisibility Cloak makes someone temporarily disappear from view. The Imperious Curse makes a person's free will temporarily disappear." Silence stretched between them as the storm raged on outside. Elena exhaled, breaking the silence, and said, "Merlin's beard. I hate to admit it, but this actually makes sense. Cassius folded his arms and added, but if this is true, what does it mean? That the Deathly Hallows were never meant to be these great gifts? That they were always tied to dark magic? Theo shrugged. Maybe, or maybe not intentionally. Possibly they were meant to be tools for mastery. But let's keep in mind that a dark wizard will only seek out powerful magic or a powerful magical object for the wrong reasons. Elena frowned and said, like Voldemort. He wanted the Elder Wand desperately. He used Avada Kedavra without hesitation and without understanding it, just as with the Elder Wand, he never understood it. Theo nodded. Exactly. That's why he failed. The true master of the Hallows isn't someone who seeks power, but someone who understands the magic. That's why Harry survived. He didn't want to control the Elder Wand. He just used it to set things right. He didn't use the Resurrection Stone selfishly. He only sought comfort. And he never used the cloak to dominate others, only to protect himself and those he loved. That's why Harry mastered all 3 Hallows and all 3 of the Unforgivable curses. The 3 sat in contemplative silence, the only sound the rain hammering against the windows. Then Elena lifted her drink. To Harry, then, for choosing the right path. Cassius and Theo clinked their glasses against hers. To Harry. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, they had uncovered a new truth. One that bound the light and the dark together in ways they had never imagined. Okay, now let's look into these things a little more closely. The idea of being the Master of Death is often misunderstood. At first glance, many believe it to be a title that grants invincibility, an unshakable dominance over life and death itself. The legend of the Deathly Hallows suggests that the one who unites the Hallows will achieve this mastery. But what if the true meaning of the title isn't about power at all? What if it's about understanding death, accepting it, and in doing so, transcending its grip? To understand this, we need to examine those who sought to master death before Harry and why they failed. Voldemort, for instance, represents the most extreme fear of death the wizarding world has ever seen. He dedicated his entire existence to avoiding it, taking increasingly unnatural steps to ensure he would never have to face it. He didn't just fear death, he despised it. In his mind, it was the ultimate weakness, something to be conquered and defeated. But despite all his efforts, he never succeeded. The Horcruxes he created were meant to anchor him to life, yet they only served to fragment him, making him less human. The Elder Wand, which he believed would make him invincible, was never truly his. He wielded it, yes, but he did not understand it, and in the end, it betrayed him. Voldemort thought that mastery of death meant escaping it, but by doing so, he became enslaved by it. His fear dictated every action he took, and ultimately, it was that very fear that led to his downfall. Dumbledore, on the other hand, had a far greater understanding. He knew that death was, as he once told Harry, the next great adventure. But despite his wisdom, even he was not immune to the allure of power. In his youth, his obsession with the Deathly Hallows was not so different from Voldemort's. He, too, sought to master them, though his reasons were framed in idealism rather than terror. The Elder Wand, the most powerful wand ever created, became his. The Resurrection Stone, an object he longed for desperately, became his downfall. His desire to see his lost loved ones again clouded his judgment, and the very power he sought turned against him. Dumbledore understood death more than most, but he still struggled with its reality. He was wise, but he was not its master. And then there's Harry, the boy who never sought to cheat death, but instead walked willingly to meet it. What makes Harry different is that he didn't desire power. He never sought the Elder Wand, nor did he wish to use the Resurrection Stone for his own gain. The cloak, which had belonged to him all along, was never a tool of conquest for him, but rather one of protection. And most importantly, when the moment came for him to make a choice, the kind of choice that defines whether one is truly the master of death, he made it without hesitation. When Voldemort stood before him in the Forbidden Forest, wand raised, Harry had the means to fight. He could have tried to run, to resist, to use the power at his disposal to find another way. But instead, he accepted his fate. He understood what Dumbledore had come to realize too late. Death was not something to be defeated, but something to be embraced. And in that moment, Harry did what no wizard before him could do. he faced death without fear. And then something extraordinary happened. Death let him go. The killing curse struck him and the Horcrux inside him, but Harry did not truly die as he should have. He found himself in a liminal space, a crossroads between life and what lay beyond. And there, he was given a choice, to move on or to return. This was the moment that truly defined him as the Master of Death, not because he cheated death, but because he was given the choice over it. What separates Harry from Voldemort and even Dumbledore is that he did not see the Hallows as a means to control fate. He used them when necessary, but let them go when the time came. He discarded the Resurrection Stone in the forest, breaking its hold over him. He chose not to wield the Elder Wand's power, instead returning it to Dumbledore's grave so that its destructive cycle would end. The only Hallow he kept was the Invisibility Cloak, fitting since it was the only one given not to defy death, but to live wisely until it came naturally. Harry did not claim immortality. He did not strive for invincibility. He understood death, and in doing so he proved that true mastery was not about domination, but acceptance. He was not afraid. When Voldemort cast the Cruciatus Curse on Harry after his supposed death, something unprecedented happened. The curse had no effect. He should have been writhing in agony, screaming in unbearable pain, just as so many had before him. But instead, Harry merely left himself being lifted into the air before settling back down, unhurt. This moment is more than just a fluke. It signifies something deeper about Harry's newfound mastery of death. By willingly sacrificing himself, he had become tethered to life and death in a way no wizard before him had. He was not just protected by Lily's lingering sacrifice or Voldemort's own blood magic. He had transcended the very forces that bound others to suffering. The Cruciatus Curse works by inflicting unbearable pain on its victims, breaking their will and leaving them in torment. But Harry, having accepted death and conquered fear itself, was beyond that kind of pain. Voldemort, who had always wielded power through control and suffering, was now powerless against someone who had let go of fear entirely. In trying to punish Harry, he unwittingly proved that the boy he had sought to destroy had become something greater, untouchable by both pain and death itself. And that, more than anything else, is why Harry Potter became the true master of death. So now, let us return to the Hog's Head, where Theo, Cassius, and I remain locked in deep conversation. The story continues. The fire in the inn's hearth crackled softly, casting flickering shadows on the walls as the storm outside pounded the cobbled streets of Hogsmeade. The three friends sat in quiet contemplation, their minds racing with the implications of Theo's theory about the Hallows. Cassius was the first to break the silence. He glanced at Theo and Alina, then down at his glass. If death really did create the Hallows, and possibly the unforgivable curses, then that raises an even bigger question, he said, swirling his drink. Who was Death? Alina raised an eyebrow and leaned forward. You think Death was real? She asked. A person? Cassius nodded slowly as he considered his words. Not necessarily a person, he said, but something more than just a fairy tale. There are legends, older than Beetle the Bard's tale, that speak of wizards who dabbled in magic so dark, so powerful that it bordered on divine. What if Death wasn't some hooded specter, but an ancient wizard? Someone whose mastery of magic was so complete that he became something more. Theo leaned in, intrigued. So you're suggesting Death was just a human wizard? He asked. Maybe the greatest wizard to ever exist? Cassius tapped his fingers against the table before nodding. Or something beyond a wizard, he said. A being who transcended mortality itself. Maybe he wasn't gifting the Hallows to the three brothers at all. Maybe he was testing them. Elena frowned and tilted her head. Testing them for what? She asked. For their worthiness, Cassius replied. Or maybe their weaknesses. He set his glass down with a quiet thud and looked at them both intently. Think about how the Hallows work. The Elder Wand, pure, unchallenged power. The Resurrection Stone, a temptation that preys on grief. The Invisibility Cloak, the only Hallow that doesn't demand anything from its bearer. If Death was real, maybe he or she was searching for something. A successor, an equal, or a soul strong enough to resist the lure of ultimate power. Theo exhaled slowly, nodding as he processed the idea. That would explain why the youngest of the three brothers was the only one to pass the test, he said. He didn't try to cheat or challenge death like the other two. He didn't crave power or let sorrow consume him. He just lived, knowing death was inevitable. And when his time came, he accepted it. Elena drummed her fingers on the table, deep in thought. So if death was a wizard, or something even greater, then the Hallows weren't just gifts, she said. They were designed to lead the unworthy to ruin and the worthy to true power. Cassius nodded. Exactly, he agreed. Or maybe the Hallows were just the clever inventions of the Peverell brothers, as some believe. But if we follow the death theory, where the Hallows are linked to the unforgivable curses, it makes even more sense, especially with everything we learned on our first day at the Department of Mysteries. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Look at Antioch, the eldest brother. He fell to greed, selfishness, and violence. Cadmus, the middle brother, was consumed by his own sorrow and took his own life. But Ignotus, the youngest, he understood life and refused to be corrupted by power. Elena took a slow sip of butterbeer before setting her mug down. But then why create the Hallows at all? She asked. If this death character wanted to test the brothers, why not challenge them directly? Why make artifacts of such immense power if the goal was simply to see how they'd use them? Theo grinned, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Because power is the ultimate test, he said. It's easy to stand against an enemy. It's harder to stand against yourself. Only someone truly selfless could master the Hallows. And upon mastering the Hallows, that person would become immune to the unforgivable curses. A gust of wind howled outside, rattling the windows. The fire flared, casting long, eerie shadows across the room. Cassius downed the last of his drink, leaned back in his chair, and said, If this theory holds, then how many others have fallen into the same trap over the centuries? How many wizards have sought the Hallows, thinking they were gaining greatness, only to be destroyed by their own desires and selfish drives? Elena lowered her gaze, her voice quieter now. So many. I can just imagine, she murmured. Then, after a pause, she looked back up. But that raises another question. If death was real, then who was he? A forgotten wizard? A dark entity hidden in legend, or something else entirely? A heavy silence settled over them. The idea that somewhere, buried beneath centuries of myth, there may have once been a being so powerful, so ancient, that he shaped the very magic they wielded. It was unsettling. And so, we leave Theo, Cassius, and Elena in the Hog's Head with lingering questions. Were the Deathly Hallows and the unforgivable curses connected? Were they created by the same hand? The possibility seems likely. The mystery of who or what crafted these legendary forces remains unsolved, but we'll uncover much more in future episodes. One thing is certain, Harry became the master of death, and by doing so, he overcame each of the unforgivable curses, used each of the Hallows for good, and proved that true mastery lies not in possessing power, but in knowing when to let it go. So we'll be delving into even more mind-blowing theories in upcoming episodes, including more on the creator of the Hallows and his connection with the Veiled Archway in the Department of Mysteries. Keep your wands at the ready and your curiosity sharp. There's always more magic waiting beneath the surface. The adventure is far from over, so stay tuned and keep your eyes open. Who knows what secrets we'll uncover next? See you soon, fellow Potterheads. And remember, the magic is only just beginning.